Hello, I'm Beth Britton, MBE. I support Dementia Community with their communications work. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, 10 Reasons to Embrace Gardening, Your Secret Weapon in Living Well with Dementia. Before I introduce you to our presenter, I wanted to briefly explain a little more about Dementia Community. Dementia Community is a charitable community benefit society, a membership cooperative that provides learning and networking opportunities for the dementia care community. We are an independent voice and inclusive organisation aiming to help all of our members to feel connected, informed, inspired, empowered, purposeful and engaged in co-produced changes that improve everyone's experiences of dementia, both in care and in wider society. This webinar is just one example of the many ways in which we do this. Community members own a £1 community share in Dementia Community and membership is open to everyone. So if you aren't already a member, do join us. You can use the QR code on your screen or the link in the chat to visit our membership page. If you're having any difficulties in joining Dementia Community, please do message me and I will try to help. I also have some notices to share with you before we begin today. So firstly, we have a date and venue for the 20th UK Dementia Congress. It will be held on Tuesday the 17th to Wednesday the 18th of November at Doncaster Racecourse, and super early bird tickets are now available. This is a limited ticket release that ends on the 30th of April 2026. And if you are a Dementia Community member, you will enjoy a 10% discount on this super early bird rate. Do use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat to secure your 2-day ticket. Also to share with you, I'd like to signpost to our newest editor's pick from the Journal of Dementia Care. This is a free article chosen by the editor of JDC, shared to give you a taste of the content of the Journal of Dementia Care. Please use the QR code on your screen or the link in the chat to read the article. Remember, if you are a member, one of your benefits is a 25% discount on a subscription to JDC. So if you enjoy the editor's pick, do subscribe. And then finally, I would like to offer a thank you to the Unforgettable Foundation, who have kindly set up a GoFundMe page for Dementia Community's webinar programme. Our webinars are free to attend, and we want to keep them this way to ensure equal access for all, but providing them does have cost implications for Dementia Community. This fundraiser is intended to help meet those costs, and if you'd like to donate, please use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping then before we begin the presentation. So as you should already have been alerted to by Zoom, we are recording this webinar. Please use the chat for your questions. We will have a Q&A and discussion after the presentation, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. Afterwards, a recording of this webinar will go onto our YouTube channel, Dementia Community. So let's get started. Our presenter for today is Fiona Thackeray, who is the CEO of Trellis. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm very passionate about gardening. I think it's a fantastic therapy, hobby, passion to have, and I'm really looking forward to learning your 10 reasons. So over to you.
Thank you, Beth. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm just going to share my screen, so give me a second and we'll get started. Can I just check everyone can see that well?
I can. That's looking good.
Thank you. And I'm going to reduce my Zoom screen so that I can see the slides. Thank you. So, well, thank you for taking the time out to join me for this presentation today, and thanks to Dementia Community for inviting me to speak. It's an honour. I'm going to just really focus in on these reasons, but there are many reasons to embrace gardening. So, you know, I'll be happy to take questions at the end and discuss more some of these aspects. Yes, Trellis is the National Organisation for Therapeutic Horticulture in Scotland. And although we're based in Scotland, we support people across the UK and indeed across the world. if they want to use gardening therapeutically with a whole range of different groups of people with different needs. But we do have quite a lot of expertise in working with groups who have dementia or living with dementia. And there's quite a good evidence base behind reasons for using gardening to live well with dementia, as the title suggests. So we're happy to support you if you have a project you'd like to get started with or a specific question. And I'll give you our website address at the end. I'm sure it's going to be in the chat as well, so that you can follow up with questions after today if you do have more ideas you'd like to explore with us. Now, I'm just going to click, but the clicking forward is a bit slow today. So there we go. That's fine. This slide is a bit busy and they're not all going to be like this at all, but I just wanted to put my 10 reasons in a big list so you could see there's lots of reasons for using gardening therapeutically to help people live well with dementia, to help yourself live well with dementia, or someone you care for, or someone in your family. And the first one is quite important to us here in Scotland because we live in quite a cloudy climate and often days are dark. But even so, getting outside to get the light that's outside, you're going to be exposed to a much, much more intense level of light than you ever get indoors. And that's really important for your circadian rhythm, which is your wake sleep cycle, making sure you're nice and alert during the day and able to sleep well at night. Great for hormones, mood, and lots of other aspects of health. And particularly in gardens, green things with chlorophyll in them reflect infrared light, which is one of the wavelengths from the sun, back at us much more intensively than other man-made surfaces, for example. And so you get a really nice extra dose of infrared light when you're in a garden or a green space. And that's really good for various aspects of health, as I'll explain in more detail. So that's circadian rhythm, getting outside and getting some daylight, which a garden encourages you to do. So if you're always wanting to see what's happening with the plants or the wildlife there, so it draws you outdoors much more often than if you don't have a garden. Or some pots, you know, we always try to make it as accessible as possible. You could just have a window box or some pots by the door, and that would be just as good. The second reason is depression and anxiety reduction. And that could be someone living with dementia, or it could be their spouse, family, a caregiver, care staff also, friends too. There's good evidence that gardening, therapeutic gardening, helps reduce both depression and anxiety significantly and sustainably. Those results last. And so we've got some more research references about that if you're interested, but it's a really good tool for those mood disorders or conditions. And also for prevention of dementia, prevention of worsening of dementia. There are some studies showing that compared to other things like the reduction of alcohol intake or taking up walking, gardening seems to have special benefits in prevention of dementia and prevention of worsening of any cognitive symptoms. Gardening's great for bone and muscle strength because you're doing weight-bearing exercise in general. You may not be, we can adapt it so that it's very little weight-bearing exercise if necessary, but in general, you're probably going to be walking about and lifting things that have some weight. And that's really important for stimulating your bones to keep renewing and your muscle strength to be maintained through your lifespan. There is a really interesting link between lower limb fitness, especially strength training, and cognitive health. It seems that if you work your lower body, whether that's walking in the garden, picking up some compost, picking up a watering can, that seems to be a really important stimulus for good cognitive health. And then vitamin D production, which we all more aware of these days. Getting outside, getting exposure to daylight, especially between April, this time of year, and October in this part of the world, means that you're going to get a little bit more chance of having good vitamin D production from your own body. And that's important for immunity, for bone health, mood, of course, inflammation, and hormones again. And then we do live in quite an indoor way with lots of screen light, that's blue light, and LEDs, those little very bright lights that everyone has in their homes and businesses nowadays. Those lights work well for seeing text and so on, but they can be flickering and they can be overstimulating. They're not really as good for infrared light. So getting outdoors away from those indoor lights is really useful for us. And then fresh air. The Victorians talked about it a lot, and my mum used to talk about it, get out in the fresh air, and there's still understood to be a lot of benefit in just getting outside and getting that fresh air. And I think the fact it's fresh is one of the reasons why, because indoor air can be very recycled, air conditioned, stale. But getting outside is good for us. It helps whisk away viruses, for example, and ionized air, which I'll explain a bit more, seems to have good health benefits too, which comes with being by the coast or after a rain shower. Growing food, of course, can help stimulate people's appetite. It means that you're hopefully getting fresher produce if you're eating the food that you've produced, fresher, higher micronutrient levels, and then reduce toxin exposure because people don't tend to put industrial fertilizers onto their homegrown food. So you know what's going into your food and you know it's good and healthy and fresh. And then finally, gardening seems to be really good for switching us out of that nervous system state where we're stressed and we're fight and flight mode and reacting all the time and more prone to be angry and irritable into that calm, connected, green. I've heard people describe it as a green or a blue state of mind, where not blue in the sense of a blue mood, but green nervous state as opposed to a red mind, where you're calm, you're more open to connecting with others, you're in a sort of learning, open, curious mindset state. And that's really important for health. And there are studies where we see that happening and people starting to notice things around them in their environment in a way that they weren't before because they were perhaps indoors or not in a green environment. So there's a big list of 10 things, and let's look at them one by one. So this is a group in the nursery, in the greenhouse in the nursery at St Andrew's Botanic Garden, and we did a nice herb planting session with them. And you know, they enjoyed lots of aspects about that, but just getting outdoors and getting that daylight exposure was one of the important things. So we're in a really nice setting with ambient light. You're a little bit protected inside the greenhouse, and that's where garden design is important because you can create protected and sheltered environments if you need to keep the elements off a little bit. But getting that exposure to daylight is really important. And people after these sessions talk about their mood lifting because they've had that exposure to daylight. Our eyes seem to, getting sunlight into our eyes early in the day and during the day is really important for regulating our sleep-wake cycle or our circadian rhythms, which is quite important because if you get away from that rhythm, it can be a source of stress, it can lead to insomnia, higher levels of inflammation, and lots of other problems related to that. And I know that dementia can involve some sort of sleep disruption. So having this ability to get out into a garden, and I said before, the garden does draw you out, it beckons you out because you're curious about what's going on out there. That really helps you to have a good wake cycle so that you're feeling nice and awake in the morning first thing, and then sleepy by the time the sun starts to fade at the end of the day. So really important to get this daylight exposure. And I think we sometimes, because we've got away from the cycles of nature, the sort of the sun waking us in the morning and then sunset meaning time to wind down because we have our screens and businesses are open 24/7 online, and we sort of almost think we don't need to be tethered to that boring old cycle anymore, but it's so important for so many aspects of our life, and gardening can make sure that we stay grounded in that cycle, and it has lots of health benefits. So that's one good reason. I mentioned depression and anxiety, and this is one of the areas where the evidence base is really quite strong now. Depression and anxiety, they're often linked, but you may suffer from one or the other separately, but they both seem to respond very well to gardening, and there's lots and lots of reasons for that. Gardening tends to happen in a social setting, in a group setting, and of course, connection with other people lifts us. But exposure to daylight is one of the reasons why it lifts our mood. As I mentioned, daylight seems to lift our mood, and one of the reasons is that it switches on some of our neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. It helps us have a boost of those feel-good chemicals. But gardening also involves hope. because you're planting seeds or you're planting small plants that you anticipate will grow into something beautiful or tasty, or perhaps a tree that endures for future generations and makes the local area nicer to be in. And it involves sharing. You know, if you are perhaps hard up or struggling for money, gardening allows you to be generous because you plant one courgette seed and you've got them to give away all summer, more than you can use. And the same with flowers. So it allows that kind of very positive interaction and sharing between people. And there is good evidence that just being in a green space seems to bring on a calmer state and reduce those anxiety symptoms that people find so troubling and can be so debilitating. So it slows your heart rate. It lowers your blood pressure, just being in a green space. As I mentioned, you get infrared light reflected back to you by plants, green elements in the environment. And that also helps with mood and inflammation, and all those things combined in depression and anxiety. So there's a lot to be said for mood improvements through gardening. And you don't even really need to know how all that works, because many people talk about just getting out into the garden and they start to feel better. And it doesn't really matter if you know how that's working. Just you can trust that it does work. And many people talk about seasonal affective disorder and having those kind of feeling lower in the winter when it's colder, you're not getting outside so much. But the garden always works in cycles. So you know that spring's coming. If you planted bulbs in the autumn, you start to see those green shoots poking through the soil, and that gives you a sense of it's going to be all right. The spring always comes back, and things will get lighter, and things will flower and flourish again after that quiet time of dormancy in the winter. So lots and lots of reasons. I could go on, but I won't. I'll go into the next slide from there. Prevention, either prevention of dementia onset itself or prevention of progression of cognitive symptoms. Again, there's good evidence that gardening is a useful tool in your prevention arsenal. So just being out in the garden, again, you're practicing social skills, you're perhaps memorizing the layout of the garden. There's lots of sensory stimuli that are keeping your cognitive sensory interpretation faculties working. So sensory input has to be understood and interpreted by your cognitive skills, your cognitive mechanisms. And that's a useful sort of prompt to kind of keep using those abilities. So I mentioned the Australian study where they compared walking, alcohol reduction, and gardening won out as the top intervention that seemed to prevent onset of dementia and worsening of dementia among the cohort of subjects. So there are other studies, again, showing that gardening seems to be a useful tool for prevention. And I think we don't know exactly how that works because there's so many things that gardening brings, from being outdoors to being physically active to being sociable and having your senses stimulated. But it's a useful one to have in any service because it does have this preventative role. Bone and muscle strength. Weight-bearing exercise is really important to stimulate your bones. Your bones are active tissue that need to keep growing and renewing through the lifespan. And one of the most useful ways to do that is to give them a signal that they need to adapt and keep growing by bearing some sort of weight, whether that's your own body weight, whether you're standing up and moving about, or whether you're lifting things in the garden from a plank of wood like these gentlemen, or a watering can to a tool or some compost. Now, we can adapt all those things. We can reduce the weight. We can have a tiny watering can that's made from just a water bottle with a tiny watering rose on the top. And you can work that by squeezing your hand, and that weighs not very much at all, to a very big, heavy watering can of the sort of standard size. Water is very heavy. And so there's lots of ways in which we can train strength in the garden. And so we can adapt it so that if someone doesn't have a great deal of hand strength or upper body strength, can get started and still be included in the activity. But then I used to sort of keep it at that level, keep everything nice and accessible and easy. But actually, it's useful if you can then increase the load a little bit in a controlled way, because strength training is so important. And in fact, the guidance from the US, from one of the medicine and health bodies in the US has just recently changed to say that strength training is essential for adult health as they age. So it's important to bring that in, and gardening offers you lots and lots of ways to do that. And we always talk about gardening being gym by stealth. You know, you're not having to go to the gym because it's good for you, because the doctor told you to. You're in the garden, you're getting the exercise by doing something that's meaningful, enjoyable, and has a nice product at the end quite often, and has the wildlife and bird song and the elements around you stimulating you and taking your mind off the fact you're actually exercising. And it's very sustainable. As I mentioned, the garden keeps you coming back to see what's happening, what's changing. But you don't have to be going to the gym just to do the exercise, just because it's good for you as a chore. You get it through doing gardening, and that's really important. If you put a load on your bones through picking something up or just bearing your own body weight-bearing exercise, you then also stimulate your muscles, because you're pulling, by moving your bones, moving your body, you're pulling on your muscles, and that stimulates them to adapt and grow and maintain their own mass and strength. So there's lots of ways in which you can do that in the garden, and it's really, really important for health. Muscle mass and strength does seem to be correlated with health span and longevity, so it's an important thing to think about and include. Cognitive health boosted by strength training and hand and eye coordination. So there is this unusual evidence that suggests strength training, especially lower body, seems to bring benefits for cognitive health, and we're not quite sure how that works yet, but it does seem to be clear in the literature. So there's evidence that just moving around and keeping your legs active and exercising is good for your cognitive health. And then, of course, you can see the gentleman here is watering, using quite a small watering can there, and he's having to sort of coordinate his hand with the can, with his eyes to put the water in the right place. And that's a really nice illustration of all the little different skills you can be working on in the garden. And again, it can be by stealth. You know, you can be setting up these activities for yourself or for someone else or a group, knowing that they're giving you all these benefits, but that's not the main focus. The focus is having fun, is gardening with your fellow gardeners, is enjoying the garden, but you're getting those crucial benefits of fine motor skill, hand-eye coordination, and lower body strength, which seems to be good for our cognition too, all in the simple act of being in the garden and taking part in those tasks. Vitamin D, yeah, increasingly we're seeing how many health elements are affected by our levels of vitamin D, and quite often it's something we're a little bit deprived of, especially in the north of the UK where the cloud cover is worse. And a lot of doctors are talking about supplementation. Whether or not you do that, obviously you're going to have more chance of making a good level of vitamin D from being exposed to daylight through being out in a garden. If you're a gardener, you're going to be going out more regularly and getting a chance to get daylight on you, which triggers a vitamin D production. It seems to be really crucial for immunity, it's important for bone health, and it helps mood. And it seems to be involved in hormones. If you think about your cortisol cycle, which is cortisol, melatonin, it's to do with waking and sleep cycles, for example. That's just one way in which vitamin D is linked to good health. This lady here is Norma. She runs a gardening project near us here in Perth, and it's a good example of the mood benefits of being outdoors and getting exposed to daylight. And we quite often run our conference next door to Norma's project, so we take people to have a good look around and get a dose of Norma as well as their vitamin D. Oops, sorry. Yeah, I mentioned this idea of getting away from artificial light. So increasingly we're a more indoor sedentary society, and I'm sure many of us here would put our hand up and say, yes, I look at my screen too much, whether that's through work, looking at a laptop, a computer, or our phones, possibly not work, and possibly just, you know, because we're being drawn back to look at them more times than we know is good for us. It's a big problem, particularly affecting young people, but it's affecting all of us. And too much exposure to those little blue light emitting diodes is not great for us. It can lead to eye health. It seems to be associated with anxiety, although that could just be the content that we're looking at. but it is overstimulating. Artificial light can often be harsh and just give you a very small segment of the wavelengths of normal light, natural light from the sun. And it can be something that eventually starts to keep you awake because you've had too much exposure to it too late in the day. And our bodies are not really set up to deal with that kind of light if it's too much. So getting outdoors, you're going to get much stronger light levels than indoors, and you will find once your eyes get to a certain age and they start to not work as well as they used to, you will notice how being outdoors more and getting that brighter daylight into your eyes is important for your eye health and just focusing and seeing things more sharply, among all these other benefits to do with inflammation levels, which seems to be something that infrared light can help with, healing, wound healing, and so on. It's all related to infrared light exposure. So there's lots of evidence there. Too much to go into here, but getting exposure to good levels of outdoor light. Of course, safe exposure. After 20 minutes in full sunlight, you want to probably wear a hat and so on and cover up your skin, but make sure you get regular exposure to daylight is really important for so many reasons. And one of the most important is sleep, because sleep is, of course, crucial for good health, and having exposure to daylight, sunlight during the day will help our sleep cycle. Fresh air. I think we all have a sense that getting outdoors in the fresh air is good for us, and sometimes we're not quite sure why, but certainly it's stimulating for our brains and our lungs to get outside and get the fresh air, whether it's breezy or very still on a sunny day. It's just a different experience from the indoor air that we quite often breathing too much of. Having a breeze come in to, opening a window and having a bit of fresh air, a breeze or a draft come in does help with virus dispersal, as we saw during the lockdown a few years ago. And natural environments do tend to affect our breathing, bring it down to a more slow, relaxed pace, and encourage diaphragmatic breathing, which is that breathing where you bring the air down into your chest and then into your belly and take a deeper breath. It seems to slow us down, slows our heart rate, and helps us to use our full lung capacity. And then I mentioned ionized air, which is when spray from the sea or splashes after raindrops hit the ground. They create more negative ions in the air, which seems to reduce pollutants. It seems to reduce pollutants and seems to boost mood. And again, don't ask me the physics of that, but there is some evidence that seems to be a nice environment for us to walk in or be out in. So lots of reasons to get some fresh air. And I think we can all relate to the feeling of having gone out after being indoors for too long. You've gone out and had the fresh air blow away the cobwebs. People talk about that feeling, don't they? It just freshens up your mind. You feel brighter, you feel sharper. And yes, lots of thumbs up. Thank you, Beth. Growing food, I think many of us can relate to the joy of eating potatoes you've just dug from the ground. This chap's was at one of our local projects here in Perth, and he's proudly showing some spring cabbages there. There's pride. There's the freshness, meaning that the vitamin and micronutrient content is really high as it can be when you eat something straight from the garden. And the flavor is going to be as good as it can be, as high as it is ever going to be before the product starts to lose vitality and get more stale. And flavor is really important because we do lose a little bit of the sensitivity of our taste buds with age. And if people aren't eating as much or as healthily or as a good a range of food anymore because they aren't so keen, they're just not got the same appetite, then stimulating the appetite with stuff that is coming in from the garden, something maybe they've grown themselves, is a great way to try and introduce foods that have maybe fallen by the wayside or become less interesting to us, to a person that we know. And of course, there's a lot of pride and creativity in taking part in a garden. So if you've chosen a kind of unusual tomato variety or a pea variety, and then it's growing and you had no idea what it was going to look like. Oh, it's purple, the pod's purple. Are the peas going to be purple? There's there's that curiosity, which is a really positive way of drawing someone in to eating some fresh salads, vegetables, fruits that they might not be keen to try otherwise if it was just coming out of a bird's eye bag out of the freezer. So there's lots of really positive ways to encourage ourselves or anyone we might know who maybe needs to be stimulated to eat more or eat a better range of foods again. Instead of badgering someone, you need to eat better, you need to eat more. There's things about curiosity, creativity, pride, and just tempting someone with something unusual or very fresh. Those are all positive ways to encourage someone to eat a better range of fresh foods. And finally, this mysterious nervous system reset or regulation. We're hearing a lot more about that these days. And there are lots of mental states, but we hear a lot about the two main ones that people are aware of, the sort of very reactive fight or flight stress mode, where we're overstimulated and we tend to overreact to things and we're not really relaxing. And that's linked to anxiety, depression, and lots of negative emotions. The other side of our nervous system, very simplistically, is the kind of relaxed but alert state that we like to get into. We're calm, we're more likely to want to connect. It's the kind of state that you might try to get to using mindfulness or playing some nice chimes or relaxing music. So meditation might bring it on, but favorite hobbies can bring it on, like knitting or whatever you enjoy. But gardening seems to do it very, very well. People talk about forgetting their troubles, forgetting to eat, forgetting to stop for coffee or whatever, and losing track of time. And that's a really nice thing, especially if you've got anxiety or you've got some sort of confusion going on, just being able to get absorbed in a task, one task, in a beneficial environment that promotes calm and relaxing feelings. That's a great thing that comes out of gardening, and I think many of us who enjoy gardening can relate to it and picture that state of mind and how it feels. It usually goes along with reduction in pain, experience of pain, reduced anger, reduced stress, and a slower heart rate, and just an overall calm feeling. And I think also we do tend to tune into more natural rhythms, noticing the seasons changing. Rather than being hurrying and rushing all the time, we start to notice that you can't rush a lettuce. You can put the seed in the soil and give it a little bit of heat even, but it's still going to take a certain amount of time to germinate. And that helps us learn how to be patient, how to wait, how to slow down. And we attune to light, as I've mentioned already, and temperature, and all those nature-governed cycles and rhythms. And those are all good for us in different ways. But enough about those 10 reasons, because we've got a little bit more to share just about our work locally. We have been working with some groups locally in Perth and also some further south in East Lothian at a GP surgery, and helping them work on their well-being, especially mental well-being and nervous system regulation, and connect with other people, connect with nature, and have a nice feeling of meaningful activity and purpose. And we've been kind of measuring our success in those working with those groups through the 5 ways to well-being, which some of you may know about. Mind has a good summary of those. And I'll go into those in a little bit more detail shortly. So we both help people set up their own projects, gardening programs, and we run our own. And we sometimes get people coming to ask us for help with different groups, including people living with dementia. And we encourage a person-centered approach and lots of simple nature connection activities, because it doesn't need to be full-on gardening, double digging, and all sorts of traditional gardening activities. And we always help people to think about how to adapt the gardening. Adapting your horticulture activities to the person's tastes and needs is really crucial. It's right at the heart of therapeutic horticulture. So adapting it to people's personal preferences, to their abilities, and to their goals. What do they want to get out of it? Is it just having fun? Simple as that. Or is it something more like working on their fine motor skills, for example? And we help people plan according to the resources they have, whether that's nothing, virtually nothing, just some saved seeds and some recycled plastic containers, that's fine. Or we can work with someone who's going for a big lottery bid and going to have a multi-million-pound grant, hopefully, to make a big walled garden. And we always encourage people to consider everything from indoor gardening at tabletop to getting outdoors and just making sure that they have good personal protective equipment, weather protective clothing, and we can also help them with adapting the tools to suit people's needs, from everything from wheat grip tools to seed dispersal gadgets that help people who maybe can't pick up tiny seed or even medium-sized seed and work with them more easily. And we have lots of ideas about seasonal activities to help people keep going all year round. So these are based on the 5 ways to well-being that I mentioned. These are the ways in which we've been working with different groups in Perth and focusing on these 5 ways to well-being. This photograph is one of our field workers, Jenna, working with some ladies from a sheltered housing complex in Perth. And we've also been working with a group from Alzheimer's Scotland who come along, people with Alzheimer's and their spouses or friends, family who come along and do some gardening with us at the Alzheimer's Scotland base in Perth. And also a group of men with some mental health conditions who are dealing with homelessness. So we've got 3 different groups in Perth. They're all working on their mental health to some extent, and they're all gardening in different ways. But one of the first things we want to allow people to experience, which seems to be important for their mental health, is connection. So we want people to connect with nature, and we want them to feel close to other people. And gardening offers a chance to do both. You can see that in action in the photograph with the ladies touching the plants, touching the soil, and chatting with each other and with Jenna. So there's that social connection, people connection, and nature connection. And I think that helps us feel good regardless of how we started off before the session. And so some of our suggestions here are just doing a tea and tabletop gardening session to get people started. You don't need to be standing up to garden. You don't need to be stooping over. You can do it all at tabletop if that's where you want to start or if that's where you want to stay. And we try and make it sociable. So make time for a tea break. Tea breaks quite often where some of the most important things happen or are disclosed or discussed, and where some of the laughs happen. So that's important to work it in. And we have all sorts of tips, like particular tablecloths to help people make sure if they've only got the dining table to work on and we don't want to upset anyone, we cover it and we make sure there's no soil being spilled on the carpet. So lots of tips about making sure that this is successful for wherever you're doing it for everyone. And we have lots of ideas, for example, a bulb lasagna or making wildflower seed bombs. So it doesn't need to be boring old, straightforward, digging up soil and dealing with worms. Some people, if that's what it is, they're out straight away. So there's lots of ways to encourage people to get started. Activity. So being active seems to be really crucial for all aspects of health. And gardening offers you lots of endless activities to do that on different levels. So it can be active just seated, but moving your upper body and your hands. Be active in that your brain's being engaged, and you can sit, stand, get outside and get really stuck in, or start with a more gentle activity. And we can always adapt the height that you're working at, raise the pot up if that's easier for you, offer people gloves and all sorts. But, taking away the barriers all the way so that people can be active and not feel like it's, oh my gosh, I've got to dig this whole row, or oh my gosh, it's not for me, I won't be able. You can be active at any level, and we'd like to start where people are comfortable, meet them where they are, and move on from there. Taking notice is one of the other 5 ways to well-being. So just observing. And this is where we talk about being and doing in the garden. Being is as important as doing, and you don't always have to be doing. And I think our modern way of living is quite often do, always busy, always doing stuff. Sometimes it's important to stop and just be. And a garden or a growing space should be designed ideally so that there's time and space to just be and have a look. And that could be observing a bee or a butterfly alighting on a flower. It could be observing the first shoots of daffodils and snowdrops poking through the earth. You could be observing the temperature if you're more measurement minded and you want to just measure the rain, measure the temperature, notice the changes of the season. That being aware of what's happening in the present moment is akin to mindfulness, but without having to do the mindfulness exercise. The garden can let you start taking notice without having to do those exercises, which aren't for everyone. And of course, the more sensory elements you have in the garden, and I'm not saying more is more here, I'm saying, you know, if you have a few sensory elements, then again, those things help you stop and observe, stop and take notice. And again, the act of stopping and take notice is doing something for your nervous system. It is helping you regulate and slow down and keep away from that stressful mind state that we generally don't want to be in. Learning. I find that I'm always learning something new about the garden. I learn from what my neighbours grow and what works for them. I learn from my mistakes. I learn from what different birds or frogs or worms show up in the soil or in the garden. Learning, of course, is really good to stimulate your cognitive health. All the aspects of your brain that respond in learning love that stimulus to keep adapting, because learning is a process of adapting. You're learning new stuff and you're assimilating it into your brain, and that's really good for your brain health. So it can be good for lots of ways. It can distract us, stimulate us. Obviously, if you build a new skill, that's great for self-esteem and feeling good about yourself. And also, it's just a process of curiosity, which, you know, exploring new subjects and letting yourself be led by that curiosity, again, is helpful for our cognitive health, but also it keeps us in that healthy nervous system state as well, of being open to learning new things. But it also could be keeping an old skill going or reviving an old skill, and that's important too. So again, being person-centered about it, finding out a person's interest, but there's lots of opportunities for learning in the garden. And finally, sharing. I mentioned this earlier. Gardening is a great way to be able to be generous if you're not wealthy in a financial sense. The garden has loads of things that you can be rich in and give away. And there's the shared experience. There's the shared gestures or sharing your help. You know, if someone needs the help to do something that you can do better than them or more easily than them, that's a nice thing to do as well. And just sharing with others, you're nurturing that social connection. You're feeling good about yourself because you're giving something. And that seems to be associated with a positive mindset and feeling good about your own self. So we have lots of activities that allow people to do this, to build, to make a kind of bulb planter, for example, that they can give as a present to people. And we do this in lots of different settings, and people love to make something and give it away with garden produce. We have used it in prisons as well. We've gone into prisons where we've been helping to create a dementia garden for prisoners, older prisoners, and they love to plant bulbs and give them to visitors and give them away. So it works for people in all kinds of settings, and it's always a big hit. So just a little bit more detail about the local projects we've been working with, and some of the outcomes we've seen. So this is again from our Alzheimer's Scotland group in Perth. You can see the biscuits are here as well as the plants, and we've been having tea and a sociable time, and then planting up these top plants into attractive container planters to take home. There we go. So we measured, we measured what people felt using the 5 ways to well-being, this connecting to others, being active, sharing, observing and noticing, using the senses and learning. And we asked people how they felt before the session and then afterwards. And we used a simple grid to help people express how they felt. This is just an example of the tools we used to measure these benefits before and after the session. And you can see that everyone, these are all the people who responded, and they all found positive change through these sessions to a greater or lesser extent. And these scores are before and after. So you can see that there's the darker yellow line is after, and you can see people definitely found a change through every session. They felt more connected, they were active, they used their senses, they shared, and they learned. We can help you do this kind of thing for yourself. We've got lots of resources on our website. That's what we do. And so you can find live demos, which are short, half to 1 hour sessions where you can learn how to do an activity. And we have lots of those on our YouTube channel, and we quite often schedule new ones that you can join for free. We have lots of suggestions for year-round gardening, including a garden bite calendar that you can sign up for in our newsletter. And you don't need to be a horticultural expert for any of this. You don't need previous experience with gardening, and that's how we lay things out so that you can come at it without that huge amount of learning to get started. So that was my run through of therapeutic horticulture as your secret weapon in living well with dementia. And we just encourage everyone to get in touch. I'll try and answer your questions now, but this is the type of comprehensive support we offer. And if you've been inspired, we hope you'll find more guidance and ideas on our website. And we'd love to hear from you. We also have a year-round gardening book that's got ideas for every week of the year to keep you going. So don't be a stranger, and thanks for listening.
Amazing. Thank you, Fiona. I absolutely loved that. I could have put thumbs up for all of it. So we've got some hearts creeping up the screen, and the messages have started in the chat. I think that was just fantastic. And obviously, because I asked you very much to focus on people living with dementia and those that we are looking after and caring for. But I think it's really important to stress, and you have really touched on this, that this isn't just good for people who have dementia or have care or support needs. This is really good for the people supporting them as well.
Absolutely.
I talk a lot about digital detox. I think as care has become a lot more digitized with digital care planning, monitoring systems, actually as staff, as support workers, as people who are there with the person, we are getting so much of this blue light, this LED in our lives, and it's not good for staff, is it? It's not going to help
Yeah.
with staff mood and how they're going to feel about coming to work.
It's really not. It has its place. It can be useful, but yeah, we do need to try and monitor it or keep it under control, limit it. And I think if you can counterbalance it by getting out and getting your little schedule it in somehow, getting a break, whether that's with someone who's living with dementia or yourself, or just as a break in your day and on your own, it can help counterbalance that to some extent. So that would be important, because you can't get rid of it. You have to live with it and work with it. But I think getting in those mini breaks of time in nature would be really helpful.
I know I hear a lot, and I heard it in my dad's care home, that, staff are too busy to take people outside. This is
Yeah,
often a really big kind of issue. We don't have time to set this up. We're too busy to do this. But actually, for managers and for owners of care and support providers, this is as much about your staff well-being as it is about the people that you're supporting. It's going to have a win-win all round.
exactly. Well, you're making out my argument for me. We do say that to people, and we see it. Occasionally we hear, for example, that people we have some directors who work in psychiatric hospital, and they have people going home earlier, earlier discharge after being involved in gardening. And then we have people talking about lower levels of stress, agitation, staff sickness since they got a garden by their ward, dementia garden, as they described it, next to the ward. Just the view seems to be just the beginning. That is enough to make a change. And then getting out is wonderful. That's, several steps more. And there's a lot to do with making sure that, well, Debbie's here, she'll back me up, that this kind of, the idea that the design has to support staff. So they have to feel they can trust the design, and it's not going to encourage people to, get into difficulties, or people worry a lot about health and safety and security. And we can make sure the design is both therapeutic, but also that everyone feels safe and secure, and that the garden can be an open space that people can go out into when they need to. And there's a lot of thinking about that, and we can advise and help with that too, making sure that it's easy to get outdoors and it becomes the norm rather than something that people have to panic about and that might lead to bad things.
Yeah. I think even if you just make a switch to first and foremost sit by the window and be seeing the outside, that's the first step, isn't it? And that's so much better than
Absolutely.
having chairs facing the TV. There's lots of stuff in the chat which I need to get to because we're running out of time. A few takeaways to summarize, I think a greenhouse is a brilliant idea. You had a lot of greenhouse pictures. It enables that natural light. It does shelter you from the elements. It will get boiling hot when the sun's beating down on it. You can put some, obviously, some blinds up. You had some of that in there, but a greenhouse, if you're going to ask your manager to invest in one thing to help you with this, it would probably be a greenhouse. Um, I had no idea that we got infrared light from plants. The green is so good for us. That's why I love being outside. I love taking notice. It's just amazing. My kids do this so well, and I would encourage everyone. Spot the birds, spot the squirrels, spot the plants. I've been watching my fern unfold, and that's been beautiful.
Yeah.
A little bit more every day. And I'm gonna, my absolute takeaway is you can't rush a lettuce. I like that. I really do like
Yes.
that. That's lovely.
True.
You rush too much, so you can't rush a lettuce. Right, let me get to the chat then. So, Nikki says, thank you, Fiona. Really interesting with lots of food for thought and lots of food potentially to grow as well. I have a lot of carers whose loved ones are living with dementia, and the garden has become their place of respite, comfort, and solace, which I
Great
think
to know.
surprised to know. Absolutely. There's lots more thank yous. The lovely Debbie is with us. Debbie did a webinar with us a couple of years ago around this time of year. I do like a good spring gardening. Let's get outside. Let's banish these winter blues. Debbie says, Fab, Fiona, love your deeper insights around how is good for everyone. As you know, we're all about the why we don't. It's so often just about how good for us it really is.
Yeah, and if people get that and are motivated and feel it, have an experience of that, then there are much fewer barriers to getting the project up and running. Debbie was also at our conference in Paris last month, so I did.
And I would highlight as well that we did a webinar with the University of Worcester, the Association of Dementia Studies, and of course they have their tools for auditing not just the home but also the garden, and that
Oh,
is
great.
because being outside is just as important as being inside. And as you say, it's about enabling those spaces.
Oh,
Um,
great. I'm glad to hear that because quite often the care standards and so on that we have in Scotland anyway, gardening's in there, but it's not really seen as equal to indoors or even given the same, nearly the same kind of attention and respect and value and all of the rest. So that's great to hear.
Anna says, thank you, Fiona. It was very good. A lot of inspiration for upcoming summer for my residents. Um, Hanka says, I've found this session very inspiring and it has given me more ideas for what we can do with our residents in our care home. Absolutely do get outside. So my dad was in care homes for 9 years. Today would have been his 99th birthday, actually.
Oh, wow.
And most of the staff were always too busy to get my dad outside, but we would always get my dad outside. Um,
Great.
and I see Hanker has also contributed this very useful nugget. We spend most of the year in our garden. As I always say, there is no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothing. I
Exactly. We
like
live
that.
by that. Yeah.
Yes. And I know Debbie would be screaming at this screen now saying, have coats and umbrellas and hats and scarves by the door. Don't have to go off and yes, there's the heart from Debbie. Don't have to go off and find them and miss that window of opportunity. Pip says, thank you. This has been very helpful and she will be in touch. Absolutely do. The contact, the website for Trellis is in the chat. The link is there for you. I've found very good gardening pots in neuro rehab to support micro movements and coordination.
Great. Great to hear about that. It'd be
And
nice to hear about those projects where you're really actively using it because if we could share a little bit about your story, then we can encourage more people to get involved. So it'd be good to know more.
I'm guessing that might be something around stroke or Parkinson's or something like that. So do get in touch with Trellis if you've got anything brilliant to share on that. Anna says we'll be calling our gardening club. You can't rush a lettuce. That's a very good name. I'll be in touch, Fiona, as I run a daycare club for people with dementia. Thank you so much for this session.
Great. Look forward to hearing from you.
And absolutely do, because as you've pointed out, this can be done on a really small scale and it can be done really cheaply as well.
Yeah. You
You
can.
know, there's some brilliant little things there, and it's not all about just putting seeds and plants in pots, is it? This lasagna idea, how do you do a bulb lasagna?
It's quite simple. We do have an activity sheet, or to describe that, and it's in our year-round garden. But basically, it's layers of different bulbs in a pot, so that you get them coming up. So they slightly overlap in time. So you might start with daffodils in the very bottom, and then tulips, and then you might, or yeah, tulips, and then some other bulbs on top. Sorry, I'm forgetting my names at the moment, just to get a nice display from one pot. And the people would think, well, the daffodils have got a long way to go, but they will. They'll grow all the way up to the light, and you can pack a lot into a pot. And so you get a sort of seasonal succession of show from the same pot. And it's a lovely thing to do. And we've got a cross section diagram of how it looks from the side. So it's a nice tactile activity as well.
It sounds fantastic. And I think if you want to get growing things, now is the perfect time, isn't it? Particularly food related things that you would like to be harvesting over the summer. You
Yeah,
absolutely need to crack on with that. And something else I would kind of point out to people as well, it's a brilliant intergenerational activity.
absolutely. Yeah. We have projects where maybe local school kids will come in and garden with people in a care setting. And of course, it's a really good talking point. So kids will interact with plants and ask questions, and people who are perhaps receiving care or in a care setting could or in any setting could share their knowledge. If they've had a lifetime of gardening wisdom to share, then that's really great, a great interaction to have. And of course, there's that thing of learning and reviving old or previous knowledge, old skills, bringing them back into use by talking about them.
Definitely. Alison says, great information. We are always looking for new ideas. We promote feeding the birds. We have planted out our summer bulbs already.
Good for
Lovely.
you. Great to hear.
Yeah. Get something growing that you can eat as well. I think that's
Mm.
it's just great fun, isn't it? And I guess if you've got a loved one where they're starting to struggle with their garden, they're still living at home, it's a chance for you to go and help them with that and learn from them. It's a chance for grandkids to get involved
Mhm.
with helping to tidy up the garden and making sure that granny or granddad or uncle or aunt's garden remains a place they can continue to access. Because I think it's always very sad if someone's been a very keen gardener and actually, because of perhaps some mobility issues or they need some modifications and it doesn't happen, and then the garden starts to go to rack and ruin, and it's
Yeah, and we can help advise on that, on making modifications, but sometimes people are far away from family or help. And quite often the garden's the reason it's talked about for someone going into a care setting sometimes. And if there isn't a garden provided or gardening activity, it's an extra blow, it's a big loss. So another reason to try as far as you can to provide some kind of, even if it's just gardening activity and some pots, it really helps people if they don't have to let go of that activity entirely.
I think if you're a home care provider and your staff, I know home care workers are incredibly stretched, but if you provide any sort of add-on, or maybe you work with gardeners in your local area to help support the people that you're providing dom care to, I think that would be lovely to hear about that. So
Yeah,
we all like to
absolutely.
have a little bit of evidence around that because we know people want to stay at home and that's really, really important. Hank is saying our gardening has increased because of our intergenerational gardening
Uh,
activities.
Great to hear. Yes, bringing
Which
young people with loads of activity, energy, and ideas, and you can do more activities more quick, and everything just gets more lively, doesn't it? If you have other people coming in with
Yeah, and it's
questions
that
and
social
ideas.
thing, isn't it? Alison says we've planted the same bulbs in our care home and in our local school. They help us plant and we help them.
Lovely.
And you can have
Yeah.
maybe a little competition, couldn't you?
Mm.
I know my son at the moment, his little class is part of a competition with other schools to see whose potatoes grow the fastest. So yeah, I think that's fantastic. Lana says we have an eco group with our local school. It's great for getting the children involved with sustainability activities. Absolutely. Kids always have a lot of questions and want to learn. Jack saying that's what I do. Dig for Dementia. Home visits to provide supportive gardening for people who are in their own homes, as well as care home group workshops. I love this, Jack.
Fantastic.
This is
Yeah,
fantastic.
great to
I'm
hear
going to make
about.
a note of Dig for Dementia, and I'm going to go and have a look at what you do. And you can get in
Yeah.
touch with Dementia Community via our info at Jack if you want to share more information with us as well. And Hanker, there is opportunities for residents to take part in agriculture shows, as this is something they would have done before.
Yeah, I love an agriculture show, and they're so nostalgic, but also there's always new stuff. And another thing that we notice is that older people who've gardened for decades maybe quite often have really great knowledge about names, unusual names that are almost forgotten for plants. And I mean, there's been a book written about that, kids losing the language of nature and not having words to express certain bird species or buds or different states of growth of plants and things. And so that's an area where someone who is maybe living with dementia could feel that they've got something unique to contribute. So because that knowledge is not held by very many people anymore. So it's great to hear what people remember from interacting with plants and gardens and agricultural landscapes in the past.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think where we can give people the opportunity to give us something back, if particularly
Exactly.
if they feel like they're losing a lot, that really is truly priceless. And that's a lovely note to conclude on. I think firstly, I need to say thank you so much, Fiona, because it's been great and I've
My
loved it.
pleasure.
And I think our audience have loved it as well. Debbie says lots of local allotments have shows, a garden related shop and social events. I'm sure these would be a good connection point in communities too. I know my local one is. I think probably a takeaway message from you and me would be go get out in the garden, go do something,
Absolutely.
make that your
Here,
action
here.
from today. Thank you so much, Fiona. It's been fantastic and I really appreciate it. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So, our next webinar is Personal Care and Dementia Support for Family Carers. It is on Monday, the 27th of April. Do visit our webinars page on our website to find out more and to book your ticket. I'd also recommend following us on Eventbrite, where you will see our webinars go live. The moment that we hit the button, you will know about them and it'll give you a chance to book on. We've got lots more fantastic topics coming up. But for now, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to our presenter, Fiona Thackeray, and we look forward to seeing you again on a Dementia Community webinar soon. Thank you.